Alright, hi, I'm Catrice McLeod, and this is the first in a series of quick-ish, by my standards, of interviews of the various Flail Forward cast about their games they're working on. Today, we have Fred as our first guest.
Hi, I'm Fred. I'm working on a game called Wanderlust.
Okay, great. That makes it so much easier because I was gonna be like, so to start with, for our listeners, what's your game's name? It's like, yep, we already did that. So,
Perfect. Yes.
already off script, like 10 seconds in.
You're welcome.
Okay, good enough. Well, Wanderlust, awesome game name. So, what is it about, and why should our listeners be excited for it?
Oh gosh. So Wanderlust is a vaguely powered by the apocalypse game. It is powered by the apocalypse the same way Blades in the Dark is, I'll say. A little bit more. But it is a game in which you take the role of hobos and tramps, runaways, other people who are traveling, living on the fringes of society. And it's a game that's really about kind of their experience. It's supposed to be kind of it's emotional, and it's about the world in which you're living. It's got a bit of magical realism in that you can literally change how the world is reacting and what is within the world by how the characters are feeling and how they are reacting to situations.
That does actually sound pretty good. You've been working on your elevator pitch, I think.
Hell yes.
All right. Wow. That's definitely a good starting point. Now, one of the things that really set your game apart in previous versions I've seen, I'm not sure if it's still there anymore, was the whole concept of using like a map and placing dice physically for markers and so on. Like, do you still have this kind of really tactile feel set up for it any longer?
Yes, I do. The role of kind of the dice and how those work has changed a little bit, but ultimately you still have a roadmap like splayed out on the table while you're playing, and you are still placing dice to kind of show how the characters are moving, and to give you an idea of the like physical distance that they are occupying as you are traveling across the world.
Okay, great. Let's see. Now, since we got through like the tactile feel that you've kind of got going there, and you've also gone through like the idea of how it's all emotional and everything, and you're basically playing as a variety of different types of vagrants.
Mm-hmm.
The real question I'd have then is, what were like the original design goals that you had that led to all of these things, and really how did they end up changing over time? Because you've gone through like quite a few different variations.
Yes. Well, so this game originally came about is I, as a person, I like travel, and shortly after I got out of high school, I went and hitchhiked around the United States and slept on the streets and did all the sorts of stuff, some of the stuff you're supposed to be doing in this game. And I wanted to recreate that because there's not many games that deal with that kind of space. There are some traveling games, there's things like Ryutama and a few other things, but they didn't get the feel that I wanted. So when I started out, I was making I just wanted to make a travel game. That was my only concept of what I wanted to do. And so I started making that, and then I realized that there's no in with like just a straight travel game. Like you have to have something else in that. So I started bringing in the kind of American myth of the hobo and the magical realism I discussed before. So now I'm trying to replicate kind of feeling, the feeling of like being out on the fringes of society, and kind of being in danger often, and being very precarious, being in that situation where you're not really sure where your next meal is going to come from, where you're next going to sleep, which is can be very anxiety-inducing and very precarious feeling. So I'm trying to replicate that feeling while also giving people a space to kind of explore the relationships between the characters and how this precarious spot that I'm trying to put them in puts strains in their relationships and makes them stronger at the same time.
Okay, there's an awful lot of interesting stuff there. In particular, though, it's the whole kind of hobo vagrant thing that you've got going on here is something that's very different from like most other role-playing games. Just in general, it's like you're not really what you'd normally consider to be heroes, and if anything, you're actually kind of on the opposite side of things. Like you're not even... It's not even like you're villains or anything. It's not like you're playing the bad guys, even though you might run into issues with, the law and such, but just the very nature of being basically what's essentially the bottom rung of society almost. It's a very different playstyle to what most people have actually encountered themselves. So, like, what are you doing in particular to try to sell some of these things that you've mentioned, like the not knowing like where your next meal will be, where you're just not quite powerful? Like you still have skills and stuff that make your characters actually stand out as being like competent in a lot of ways. Like you kind of have to be to survive in this thing kind of environment, but what are you doing in relation to that?
Well, there's a few things, but one of the main ones is that a lot of the moves that you can do, because I've taken the move structure from Powered by the Apocalypse, so a lot of the things that you can do within the game are structured around being vulnerable and kind of exploiting others or getting things from others. You're not doing so by like beating them up. You're doing so by breaking down in front of them and saying, I don't have a place to sleep tonight. Can you please help me out? Or by, sneaking in and stealing some bread or something like that. Like moves, one of the moves is literally express your vulnerability, which is one of the main ways in which you can get things that you need, like get physical objects like food and water and stuff like that, that you need. And so I'm trying to set it up as you don't really have any resources necessarily, like any physical resource. You don't have swords or guns or money. So you have to kind of get everything in this very precarious position of begging or of stealing. And then getting you into trouble via that.
Yeah, I can see that. Like, even when we went through, like, the play tests we did before, like, it was pretty interesting of a feeling. To some degree, it actually, strangely enough, if for the closest thing that I think I can describe it to is it feels kind of similar to playing a kobold.
Yeah, okay, I'll take it.
It's not quite the same thing, really, but it's the closest, swords and fantasy style thing that I can think of for any sort of comparison at all. So, why your game instead of something else? Like, there are other Powered by the Apocalypse games. There are other games that can sort of do something like this, but this is a very kind of a niche concept that most people wouldn't even think to come up with, and they may not even think to play. But why would they want to play this one in particular? Like, what are they going to get out of it that you don't think that they'd even know before they went into it?
That's a good question. I think one thing I will say beforehand is I very much realize that this is not a game for everybody. It's pretty odd. It's pretty out there. You are explicitly supposed to be kind of talking about how you feel as a character and being kind of emotional, which I know is not a thing that a lot of people want to do within an RPG. But the reason that you should do it is because because you're supposed to do those kinds of things. It's because it's supposed to be kind of raw. The game is kind of supposed to hurt. And that's part of what I'm trying to do with it, is make something that's a little bit more raw, make something that's kind of real. And so if you're looking for that experience that's kind of about that raw feeling, if you're kind of into like punk and stuff like that, where you like the raw, the emotional hardcore, that's kind of what this is going for. But there's also some wonder to be found. If you're the kind of person who likes traveling, or who likes seeing interesting places, there's supposed to be this sense of wonder because you're moving from place to place and you're seeing new interesting things, and often strange and inexplicable things are occurring. And it's also hopefully going to give you a good framework for interacting with others, and just be a good simple game. You can sit down, you can pull out a nice map, and have that in front of you, and tell a good story with.
Okay, so this is definitely something that's a little bit different than basically anything that people have probably played before. One question as well, because I know this was at least something that had previously been an issue, so I do want to check on this. You do basically need a physical map to play the game. Is it still set up so that you basically end up scrawling notes and such all over the map as you play, or is that separate now?
Well, I have broadened that purview quite a bit. You can use pretty much anything you want for the map. I have like maps I got from rest stops and gas stations that I plan on using for playing this game. But you could draw your own map. You could print something off from Google Maps. You could just put dice down on the table if you kind of want to keep it without the map. And as well, scrawling on the map, although I do heavily recommend it because I love writing on things and seeing things that have been written on. There's no reason you have to in this version of the game. Though I highly recommend it, there's nothing that requires you to.
Okay, great. That's gonna make this a little bit easier for some people. Also, the mention of using a printout from Google Maps, that's probably gonna make this a lot easier for a lot of people.
Yeah, probably. I would think so. I would hope so.
Okay. You're using Powered by the Apocalypse, so it's using the Apocalypse engine, and it's a little bit... I want to use this question for pretty much everybody, but in this case, it's like... I normally would phrase it like, why would you make your own game instead of converting another on the market to your desires? But in this case, you kind of are, but at the same time, like, Powered by the Apocalypse is really good for letting you do all sorts of things in a very broad sense. Like, you're obviously still making your own game, even though it's using the Powered by the Apocalypse framework. So I guess in this case, the question's more like, why Powered by the Apocalypse instead of something else?
Well, for me, as a designer and as a player and GM, there's a lot of things that really attract me about Powered by the Apocalypse. It's got a very nice, simple setup that works for a lot of things and that I understand. I personally am not totally tied to the Powered by the Apocalypse framework. In fact, there's a lot of things I'm doing that are moving away from it, and I probably will move further away from it as I continue along. Partly it's just for convenience. I wanted something I could throw this game onto, and I understand the skeleton of Powered by the Apocalypse, so I can throw the meat of the game onto it, and and then continue on with other parts of designing that I think are more important for the moment. As well, it has some good structure some good structure and ideas for how to have a group that is both kind of works well together, but also has some inner conflict and that was part of the one of the important things that I wanted to do when I was thinking about this game and thinking about how to structure the group dynamic. And the move system works very well for what I want to do, which, giving people specific ways that they can interact with the world, and kind of structuring how things are done to a certain extent and what those things mean by the framework of the game.
Excellent. So, for the next thing to ask then, where would you specify like your overall balance between, say, the narrative elements of your game and the gameplay elements?
That's kind of a tough question. I mean, I would say, I guess because it comes from the story gaming, I will say tradition to a certain extent, because it's acquired by the Apocalypse game, and I am a dirty story gamer in general.
So like it's a bad thing.
it's not. I just like to make the joke. But it's further on the narrative side, I would say. I mean, obviously there's still game aspects to it because it's a role-playing game. But if I had to choose, I would say it's further on the narrative side. Yes.
Okay, cool. In which case, well, as we've mentioned, you've gone through like quite a few different iterations of your game. So
yes.
This is kind of true of pretty much anybody who's making a game, but you've been going through like a fair number, even by like standard amounts. Like usually it's like, oh well, there's like a section or two that I need to overhaul completely. You've basically redone the entire game a few times over, from my understanding.
Yes.
What has been like the biggest challenge in that so far? Like, is there one central thing that's been getting you hung up and you keep running into different ways to try to solve the issue? Or is it different things changing your mind about the goals? Or really, what's causing like so many different iterations?
Well, I think this is the first role-playing game I've ever made, and I just went into it with very little knowledge of how to make a role-playing game and not a huge amount of experience with role-playing games in general. So a lot of the reason I've gone through so many iterations is I've just learned a lot about how to design role-playing games and about role-playing games in general. So, I mean, my first idea of how to make the game was very much like a Ryutama D&D-esque setup, and that just didn't work. And I constantly do things that I'm like, this is a great idea, and then I realize, oh, that's not how anything works. Like, I obviously, coming from a place of fairly minimal understanding, and then have just kind of built up that idea of both what I want it to be and how I can actually do that.
All right. Yeah, I can see that causing more than a few little problems there. But that actually does raise another question as well. Is like, you mentioned this is your first time that you've tried to make like a full game. Do you have any experience at all with game design previous to this? Like any previous like Powered by the Apocalypse games, or anything at all that you've tried to put together creatively, I suppose?
Anything I've tried to put together creatively? I mean, I have a fair amount of experience with creative endeavors. But before I made this, I did throw together a couple of very short role-playing games, like a page or two. But they weren't in any way really play tested beyond maybe once, and I didn't put a whole lot of work into them. As well, I've worked on video game stuff in the past, so I'm vaguely familiar with game design as a thing. Though again, my understanding of that is not particularly extensive. And I've done other creative projects. I, write fiction, and I guess that's the main thing.
Well, you did mention that you've worked on some other games in the past, but like you said, it's only been like a page or two before. So, what makes this one in particular so special to you? Like, why focus on this particular game as the one that you want to put all the time and effort into?
That's a complicated question. One, as I said earlier, there's no other game like this, and so I really wanted to fill that niche, I suppose. This to me was an important thing that should exist. And in general, I really enjoy this kind of storytelling, and have some personal experience to draw on. And part of like making this game for me was kind of thinking about past experiences and processing that. And every time I go back to role-playing games, sometimes I think about something else, but I always go back to this. It's just the one that's always on my mind. I don't think I'll be able to get it off my mind until I'm actually done with it.
Well, I'm not even sure if you will then, because then you just have the ability to play it.
Yeah, that's true. Or at least I'll get the idea of making it out of my mind for a little bit, at least.
Okay, good enough. In that case, like, really the final big question I have for you then is, really, what would be the single thing that you would say describes your game above all else? Like, if you had to put it in just like one sentence, like nothing big, nothing fancy, just try to describe the entire thing as simple as possible. What is the core theme to it? How would you describe all of it in such a small space?
Oh dear.
We're going to logline levels.
Oh no, that's a tough question. Okay, in one sentence, how would I do it? Emotional vagabond story game. Did it in 4 words.
It's a tough thing to do, to get those into such a small space, but yeah, I think that's a pretty good descriptor for it from what I've seen of it.
All right,
so, yeah.
Perfect.
Do you have any other things that you'd like to mention?
Any other things that I would like to mention? I don't think so. I mean, one thing is, hopefully we'll include a link to the document, so you can take a look at the document if you want. I don't really care. If you want to steal things from it, go ahead. Whatever. It's just a fun thing I'm making. And as well, and if you read it and you play it, you should tell me about it. And all things are subject to change. This might be an entirely different. If you listen to this in a year, this might be an entirely different game.
Oh, possibly, probably from past experience, from the looks of it. To that end, there is one other question while I think of it. Then is since we're gonna try to make sure that you can actually see this. We're not even sure where it's going to be placed at the moment. Originally, I was going to put it on my YouTube channel, and now we're thinking about getting a separate YouTube channel just for these. Question would be, where would you like people to actually contact you for feedback when they actually try your game and want to tell you about it? Like, do you want them to contact you on Discord directly, or maybe on whichever website it's hosted on as a comment, or how would you prefer to be contacted?
That is a good question. You can, since it is a Google Doc, the thing that I am sharing, if you make comments on the Google Doc, I will see those, and you can tell me about that there. Or if you want to talk to me on Discord, I am Flem the Man Dragon, all lower caps, spelled like the regular words, number 2240, and you can add me on here as well. If you want to send me an email about it, my email is f.p.l.freddie@gmail.com. And you can shoot me an email there, and I will be excited to talk about my game. If you send me an email about, like, I don't know, MLMs or something, I'm not going to reply. But I'm happy to talk about Wanderlust.
Yeah, please, no dick pics. I mean, I don't mind them. Go right ahead, but...
No, send me your dick pics.
No. All right, good enough. So, yeah. That's a good way to end this. So, I'm just going to say that thank you very much for coming on and talking about your game Wanderlust. And, yeah, if there'll be more to these than just this. Like, this is just the first of a number of them. We're going to go through, like, everybody's games in Flail Forward, so...
Oh, yeah, thanks for interviewing me, Kat.
Oh, welcome. So, yeah, hopefully the next one will go even better. Thank you for tolerating being the guinea pig.
You're welcome. It was fun. All right.
I had fun at the very least. I'm glad you did too.
Yeah, so, of course.
And hopefully our listener is, having something that vaguely approximates fun, or at least they're not, choking on their own vomit. I mean...
Oh, God, I'd hope not. That's nasty.
Oh, I mean, you are Flem, the man-dragon, right?
Yes.
So, I don't know. I was gonna go somewhere with that, but it's probably better I don't. So, let's just end it there.